Hi, my name is Adela Talbot and I'm a board member of Women in Politics. Women in Politics has launched the 2020 Ask Her campaign as part of an effort to encourage women to consider running for office in an upcoming election at any level of government. This campaign's primary goal is to support all women who would like to become involved with politics by sharing the experiences, perspectives, and advice of other women who have already entered this arena. We will hear from women who have previously served in public office, from current elected officials, and women who have run in the past. All will offer their advice and experience to help inspire other women to enter the race. Above all, we want to achieve the goal of having more women's voices at decision-making tables. Today, we welcome Morena Hernandez, who was the former candidate in Ward 8 in the last municipal election in London. Thank you so much for joining us, Morena.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Women in Politics has been such a great group and source of support to me. I'm just happy to be here and share with you a little bit of my experience.
I'm so glad to speak with you. So I want this to be a free-flowing conversation with you. I just want you to tell me a little bit about your experience. I have questions that I can ask you to kind of further the conversation and keep it going. But really, I just want to hear from you and just get to know you a little bit more and hear your experience as somebody who previously ran for public office. So maybe we could start the conversation just by you telling me a little bit about the moment that you decided to run and how you arrived at that moment.
Sure. I'd been thinking about it for some time, and there's so many issues that really matter to me around our city and our community, and there's things that you hear from your neighbors and things that you experience just from living in London. And it got to the point where every time I would chat with others about things that I was concerned about, the conversation would ultimately end with them saying, well, you should do something about it. Why don't you run? And, and at first I would just sort of chuckle and say, no, that's not for me. And it just, I think all those conversations just sort of planted that seed, and it started to grow and it started to grow. And then one day I was just sitting there and I thought, there's so many things that I worry about, and there's so many places where I think that I could contribute and that we could bring positive changes and look at them through a different lens in the city, and then that could benefit others that maybe don't have access to all the same things that I have access and I benefit from. And I felt I just couldn't sit back anymore. And so I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to get these nomination forms. If I can get the number of people that I need to sign those, then I'll submit it. And so I did that. And then it didn't take me very long, which was a surprise to me. And then I thought, well, now I can't go back because that was what I had set as that threshold. And so I went and I submitted them and my nomination, and then from then on, it just took off.
That's great. Thank you. I'm wondering if you could touch a little bit on that experience for you, sort of like getting up to the plate of handing in the nomination forms, kind of the process from there on out on the campaign for you as a woman who was running a campaign. Was it everything that you were expecting it to be? Were there particular challenges that you faced that you think are specific to you having been a woman who was running at the time? Were there hurdles that you had to overcome? How you overcame them? Things like that.
Absolutely. So when I was still considering and when I was getting all those nominations forms filled out, there were still conversations happening behind the scenes, and I had reached out to a number of different people that had run before and people who are advocates in the community, just to sort of hear their take on what the issues were, and to make sure that that the issues that I was considering were actually priorities for people around the city. And as as those conversations started to resonate, and I kept hearing people, absolutely run. And there were also people who had those warning stories, right, where they'll tell you, as a woman, here are some things that you might face once you decide to run. Your life becomes very public, and people sometimes feel entitled to ask you questions and to pry into your personal life and that of your family, and question your not question everything that you stand for. And so you really have to prepare yourself for that. And I think another thing was that for the first time in a very long time, someone brought up uh, the fact that I'm a woman of color, and how, when they had political experience, that sort of also played a role, and it wasn't a positive experience for them. And safety concerns, people talked about, with being a woman, the biggest thing was, if you go to the door, make sure there's someone with you, make sure that you're safe, that you're aware of your surroundings. And the economic factor also, people talked about that. They mentioned, are you in a place where you could take time off work? Will you be able to manage it? How, what, and whens, all of that really starts to cast some self-doubt, right? And so, but as it became more real, and as I handed in my nomination, and I was really determined, obviously before that, I had a conversation with my family, and it was apparent that they were behind me 100%, and they knew that from that moment on, a lot of things would become public. And so knowing that, it just, you know, it moved me forward from then on. And I have to say though that, and I don't know if this was my first time running, so I don't know if it was the effect of the ranked ballots as well. But people were surprisingly nice at the door and on the campaign trail. And, from the first door that I knocked on to the last one, I think that the positive experiences far outweighed the negative ones. Of course, there were people who were combative at the door, but I think, even the things that they would say, they had nothing to do with the issues at hand, and they had nothing to do with running. It was just something that was coming from somewhere else, and it was important to not take that personally and not take that to heart. So overall, I think, it was a great experience, and the support that kept coming. And it always seemed like when I was facing a hurdle, there would be a big support that would come in. And that's where women in politics actually came in for me, because there was a day where I was going through email, and I answered all of my emails. And of course, there's always the keyboard warriors and people who will say things to you that they wouldn't say to you face to face, but they'll say over email. And it was one of those days where I was sort of sorting through those, and I got this email from Women in Politics saying, we're going to be helping do these number of things. We're going to, if you need support, we're going to have this evening where we're going to have other women candidates come together. Um, and I reached out, and when everyone was so wonderful, and there was such a wealth of knowledge, and everyone was so generous with their time. And so I think that that's something that I hadn't expected. Complete strangers just reaching out and saying, "Hey, how can we help you?" So that, I think, was such a wonderful experience for me.
That's so good to hear. I'm so glad. How did you grapple with so you mentioned that you had been given these sort of warning stories of negative experiences, whether it was from women who had run to women of color who had run. How did you grapple with that and then forge on the trail? How did that affect you, and how did you move forward?
I think one of the biggest things for me was, it's always important to listen to what people are saying to you, because obviously if they're mentioning it, that there's some truth to it. That was their experience. And so it's always good to be cautious. And so one of the things that we decided early on was that there would always be someone with me when I was going to the door. And although I was doing most of the talking, there would always be someone there just as a safety measure. And then as our team grew, we started to, a lot of the people on my team actually were new to politics. So we were very grassroots and just really learning along the way. And so one of the things that we decided early on was to pair up volunteers. And that we learned later on, that was slowing us down, but it did give me that peace of mind knowing that there were always two people at the door. So whatever measures I was putting in place for myself, we tried to put in place for everyone on our team. And every time I would go to the door, I would try to leave those expectations behind and just talk to that person or those people one at a time, and just take each experience that way as it came. And when there was a negative experience, the thing is, when you're in front of someone's door, it's okay for you to walk away. You don't have, one of the things is, yes, this is a potential voter, but there's no reason for you, if you're being respectful, if you're following all the rules, there's no reason for you to take on abuse, and there's no reason for you to take on violent situations. And so I think that if it's something that can't be de-escalated and you get a feeling for it, or if you feel unsafe, then you can walk away. You can thank them for their time and walk away. And then just move on to the next door. But those experiences for me personally were so far and few that we would walk away, shake it off, and then move on. Um, and I think that's what I would say to anyone who would be in that situation, is just move on to the next, and just leave that behind you. And your safety, I think, is the main issue. And beyond that, I think we just try to stay positive. And I would talk to other people who had more experience in politics, and just sort of say, here's the situation, here's what happened. Is there a different way that I could have managed this or handled this? And then just kind of go through that, regroup, and just keep going. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I want to touch a little bit on what you just mentioned. So you said that you would go to individuals who had experience in politics, and you had, I think you had previously mentioned that if you were to emulate anybody in council before, that it was Joni Beckler. Is that, am I remembering that right?
Yes. So I couldn't pick just one, but Joni is, I haven't had the chance to meet her, but here's someone who is brilliant, so knowledgeable. She is so passionate and so well loved, and loved because she does what she says she's going to do, and she's transparent. And so, I thought, if you're going to be serving people, and if you're going to be of service to your community, that's what you need to do. And so I didn't have a chance to chat with her, but I did have a chance to chat with other councillors in the city, and our Ward 8 outgoing councillor, who was so generous with his time. And so it's always nice to see that people who are serving the city are willing to, whether they're running again or not, they're still, if you reach out, people will surprise you, and will be generous with their time, and if they can, obviously, because when you're busy running a campaign, that's a bit of a challenge. But if you come prepared, I think, with questions and with things that you're really wanting to learn, they're a phenomenal source of knowledge.
That's great. I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit, to talk about how women, whether you met them or not, like, it is not that, like, if you didn't meet Joni, that's totally fine. But whether you met them or not, what role did women who were serving in office play in your campaign, and your establishing yourself on the trail, maybe even arriving to the decision of actually running? Kind of, how important was it to have somebody to kind of blaze that trail before you? How did that help you? And what do you kind of hope for the future? not whether it's like related to your personal goals of running, just generally. It's been a couple of years, a lot has happened, you know. What more can we do to kind of set that path for women who want to run?
Of course. I think, there are a number of people that I've seen their work and I've had an opportunity to meet them. For the people who represent Ward 8, London and London West, um, of different political stripes. One of the things that I've found is when you have certain women in that are serving, they look at things through a different lens. They bring their experience, whether it's as as women, as mothers, as whatever it is that they have in their toolkit, they bring that forward. And I find that um, at the end of the day, they set aside that partisanship, has been my experience with, at least with the women that I've met. And then, they sort of lay things bare. And from my experience and from speaking with them, the biggest thing was look at the issues and how can that, how can we make it better, not just for that small part that you represent, but for everyone in general. And so that was one thing, because yes, when you run, you're representing, you get elected, your constituents are from a specific area. But at the end of the day, if you remove those barriers, if you support and if you pass bills that can be transformational for your area, they're going to affect a much larger population. And I think that's, when you look at the issues that face society, sometimes it's not all about economics. There are so many other things that, yes, at the end of the day, they'll make it better. So it'll feed back to a better economical climate, but there's social issues, right? If you come from a family where there's food insecurity, there's so many things that are going to revolve around that. Are kids going to be able to concentrate in school if they're hungry? Are if their parents have precarious work environments, if housing is uncertain, all of these things, right? They all play into uh, what how we experience society and the quality of life that we can have. So if we can improve on all these small points that might seem separate, and that have nothing to do with taxes or the big issue that we were seeing in the city at the time that I ran, which was BRT, but they're so important and they get lost in the mix. And so one of the things that I loved is that these women that I met along the way, they were listening to the constituents and they were listening to people and they were going back to their parties and to the work that they were doing. And they were trying to push for these policies that would improve all these things that improve quality of life. And so I think for me, that really motivated me. And so I thought, you know what, if they're doing this, then you need more voices that can come and do these, because these things matter to me as well, and they matter to my neighbors, and they matter to my friends, regardless of political stripes. So I think that was one of the things that I really admired about them, and that in the future, whether it's for me or whether it's for me choosing someone that I'm going to vote for, those are the things that I'm going to look at.
Yeah, and certainly improving on some of those issues that would have been that you're discussing, and some of the social issues, improving on some of those, which actually open up the space for more women to run at the end of the day anyhow. So it kind of feeds itself. So I won't keep you too much longer. I'm wondering if you could give me a few words of advice. So this will be separate from the promo clip that we shoot, but if you could give me just a few words of advice. If you were talking to somebody who approached you today and they were telling you, I'm thinking of running, whether it's for municipal politics or provincial, federal trustees, anything, you have a young woman in front of you and she's playing with the idea, what would be your key advice to this young woman?
I would say set your self-doubt aside and run. Think about the issues that matter for you and run. There's no better time to run than now. If you feel that in your heart and you know that there are things that you're passionate about, run. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because you'd be surprised at the generosity and the willingness of people that share your same values and share your same views and want to make your city a better place. Uh, they'll be generous with their time and their knowledge. So don't be afraid to ask and run.
That's great. Thank you.